Satoru Iwata first joined Nintendo back in 2000 as the company's general manager of corporate planning, overseeing Nintendo's overall strategy. At the time, Iwata had already made a name for himself developing games for Nintendo while working at HAL Laboratory, where he gained a reputation for his technical brilliance and unique style of leadership. But Iwata was always fascinated with games and computers early on. Raised in 60s-70s Sapporo, Japan, he would first experiment with demo machines connected via telephone lines in grade school, even teaching himself how to program on an HP 65 calculator, which he was able to buy from working part-time as a dishwasher. He would make simple games from scratch and proudly share them with friends at school. When he was home, his curiosity would lead him to dismantling items around the house, as he tried to figure out how things worked. He would often visit the local subway station where he'd spend countless hours mastering a numbers game called Game 31. Iwata was captivated by its interactivity, the idea that you could type something in and the machine would respond. He continued teaching himself how to program all through high school and college, enrolling in computer science at Tokyo's Institute of Technology, the closest thing to video games back then, where he and like-minded students would rent in Akihabara, Tokyo's tech hub, making a small game coding club and coining Iwata's room as Game Center Iwata. But university wasn't challenging Iwata, professors noting Iwata's proficiency with software programming, saying Iwata could write programs faster and more accurately than any of the other students. So Iwata decided he would intern for free at his favorite after-school hangout spot, that being Commodore Japan, where he would help lead engineer Yash Terakura with tasks around the office and also get closer to computers, hardware that wasn't yet available to the public. He would even assist developing their Commodore Color PET prototype. Terakura would take Iwata under his wing and mentor him, teaching Iwata about Commodore and its engineering. Eventually, Iwata would buy his own Commodore PET computer. Of course, curious about the system's inner workings, he would take it apart and learn more about how the system worked, later discovering that very CPU would be the same processor Nintendo would use in their Famicom system. Iwata would come across Space Invaders, further motivating him to make more homemade games in his room, one of which being his own Space Invaders-inspired game. Iwata would also frequently visit the local Seibu department store. He would store his games in cassette tapes and share them with employees there. They would eventually warm up to Iwata and ask him to join a small game developer group they were forming, that group being Halcon, or better known as HAL Laboratory Inc. His father, serving as a prefectural official just elected mayor, was not keen on Iwata's choice to join the group, but Iwata would do it anyway. He followed his heart. He loved making games and would join HAL without his father's approval. He would first join there part-time as their 5th employee and only programmer, and would even act as their engineer, designer, and marketer. During their breaks, Iwata and his colleagues would often visit the nearby arcade, where they'll find inspiration for their own games, sometimes even making clones of more well-known titles. One of their first creations was a peripheral that enabled computers to display graphics. Iwata quickly stood out for his abilities and dedication, and after graduating in '82, Iwata would join HAL full-time, becoming the company's coordinator of software production in the following year. Iwata wanted HAL to make games for Nintendo, and with his knowledge, this would allow HAL to be one step ahead from its competitors. He knew about the inner workings of Famicom even more than Nintendo's own programmers. He would reverse engineer its hardware, creating their own developer tools, all before Nintendo even officially allowed third-party developers to work on their games. Iwata would travel to Kyoto himself and request permission to make games for Nintendo, where then-President Hiroshi Yamauchi, impressed with Iwata's ability, granted HAL a license, creating a partnership between HAL and Nintendo. Iwata's first commercially released game was a port of the arcade classic Joust, and he completed it quickly in just 2 months. Soon after, Nintendo was struggling to find a developer for Open Tournament Golf. Due to the cartridge's limited storage, nobody thought it was possible to make the game work, but Iwata boldly stepped forward and volunteered, devising a custom data compression method to fit all 18 courses. The people there would start to call him the Super Programmer. Yamauchi was taking note of Iwata, becoming personally connected with HAL and its success. He would then invest money into HAL and officially make HAL Nintendo's second-party developer. He would also promote Iwata to development manager and board member. Iwata would go on to work on Balloon Fight, somehow managing to make it run even smoother on the Famicom system, more so than its original arcade version. Nintendo would take this same calculation and use it for their underwater levels in Super Mario Bros. Driven by his passion, Iwata would spend weekends and holidays immersed in his work, solving complex problems, creating new tools for Nintendo, and ensuring projects would run more smoothly. In '87, Hal was working on a racing game, and it was this time he would first work with Shigeru Miyamoto. Together, they remade the game with a new creative approach. This included new courses and even adding Mario as a character. And while making this game, Iwata learned from Miyamoto the importance of creativity, saying engineering is not quite as important as imagination. Iwata would further strengthen Hal's relationship with Nintendo, fostering new and upcoming talent of his own, a young and eager 19-year-old Masahiro Sakurai being one of them. And Iwata would give an unusual amount of freedom to Sakurai, who was also the youngest member of the development team. While this was incredibly uncommon, it was thanks to this style of leadership which allowed his colleagues like Sakurai to truly express themselves. Iwata challenged Sakurai to make a game made for both beginners and seasoned gamers alike. And so, after some input from Miyamoto, Sakurai would come up with the idea of Kirby. Iwata would assist with programming Kirby's Dream Land, acting more as a partner than a boss, and Kirby's Dream Land would then release in '92, becoming Hal's first big break, selling millions of copies worldwide. Not only was Iwata remarkably tech-savvy, but he was also an incredible leader, being able to communicate his ideas and support the ideas of others effectively. HAL was growing and expanding its headquarters. However, HAL started to overextend itself, which led to a severe financial crisis in '93. So, seeing this as a chance to test Iwata's potential, Yamauchi entrusted Iwata with the task of saving HAL, appointing Iwata as the president of HAL Laboratory. Iwata rose to the challenge and would begin shifting the company's focus towards making more fun and accessible games for Nintendo, his reputation quickly becoming the developer's president. Because Iwata was known for being hands-on and direct, colleagues would often approach him with requests of their own. One of the earliest examples came from Shigesato Itoi, creator of the Mother series and Ape Inc.'s development of Mother 2, which was on the verge of being scrapped after 4 years of development due to some serious technical issues. Iwata stepped in to save the game from crashing, laying out two options: stick with the existing code and take another 2 years to finish, or start over from scratch and try to wrap it up in 6 months. Itoi decided to start fresh, so Iwata and his team completely rewrote the code. Itoi later saying Iwata saved the game. Because of this relationship, Iwata would nurture the link between Nintendo and Ape Inc., assisting with their transition into what we know it as today, Creatures Inc. lending technical support to Game Freak's newest project, Pocket Monsters, otherwise known as Pokemon. Tsunekazu Ishihara, president of the Pokemon Company, would begin working with Iwata and Creatures Inc. in an attempt to localize Pokemon Red and Green in the West. Ishihara recalls Iwata grabbing the source code for both games. Bam! Iwata read through it all, then began mapping out a course on how to make a foreign version for it. Iwata played a pivotal role in bringing Pokemon to the West. During Gold and Silver's development, Iwata came up with custom data compression tools which made it possible to include not just the new Johto region, but also the entire Kanto region from the original games, all on a single Game Boy cartridge, basically doubling the size of the game. Game Freak couldn't believe just how much content Iwata managed to squeeze into the limited hardware. Game Freak ran into a major problem with Pokemon Stadium, where they no longer had the documentation for the original battle system. But by diving into the original source code, Iwata was able to recreate and implement the entire battle system in just 1 week. Game Freak's programmer Shigeki Morimoto, who had originally written the system, was stunned. "I created that battle program and it really took a long time to put together. But when I heard that Iwata had been able to port it over in about a week and that it was already working, well, I thought, what kind of company president is this?" Iwata was also supporting Sakurai's new vision for a fighter game where you could knock out your opponents off the stage as opposed to losing health. Sakurai, however, wanted to make a fighting game featuring Nintendo characters, and so Iwata decided he would personally meet with Miyamoto, explaining the concept. Miyamoto initially rejected the idea, but Iwata hid this rejection from Sakurai so that the two could still secretly work on it together. He would go on to task Sakurai with developing the controls, along with the fighting mechanics for the game, while Iwata himself would program the prototype during his off time on the weekends. Miyamoto would approve of it. The game would then release in 1999, and the Smash franchise would become one of Nintendo's biggest successes. As president of HAL, Iwata successfully led the company out of approximately 1.5 billion yen in debt, even refusing a formal contract and taking a modest salary to turn the company around, all while not laying off any of HAL's employees. Iwata later said, "If we reduce the number of employees for better short-term financial results, employee morale will decrease. I sincerely doubt employees who fear they may be laid off will be able to develop software titles that could impress people around the world." From transitioning games to 3D to restructuring a variety of game code, not only was he an expert programmer, but this moment would go on to define his future as a game-changing leader. And just a year later in 2000, Nintendo president Yamauchi officially asked Iwata to join Nintendo as the head of its corporate planning division, also making Iwata a member of Nintendo's board of directors. Iwata aligned with Yamauchi's long-term vision, that Nintendo should lead through innovation, not imitation, and if Iwata wanted to shift Nintendo's trajectory, he would need to shift the company's overall idea on what it means to be innovative, challenging developers to find new ways to play games. Over the next 2 years, Iwata would locate Nintendo's weakest points, slashing both the cost and duration of game development without compromising quality or hurting employees, raising Nintendo's profits by 20% in the first year and 41% in the next. Yamauchi was taken back by what Iwata managed to do in just his first 2 years. But even with all these new responsibilities, Iwata still managed to roll up his sleeves and assist in the development process of games. His home was in the trenches. He would sit with Nintendo's programmers reading codes, debugging games like Melee, ensuring that it released on time, all while Iwata still continued to tear down Nintendo's barriers in order to streamline communication between hardware and software divisions. And staff appreciated Iwata's fresh approach. They could relate and connect to his technical background, his experience bridging gaps between developers and upper management. Iwata would also later further Nintendo's transparency, connecting developers with fans by sharing behind-the-scenes insight through his interview series Iwata Asks. Inspired by his own background in programming and his continued curiosity about how other programmers think, Yamauchi was always usually much more private, but his trust in Iwata allowed him to open up. And so, after 50+ years at Nintendo, Yamauchi personally selected Iwata as his successor, making Iwata the first president of Nintendo not related to the Yamauchi family. This endorsement was significant, as the Yamauchi family was known to be extremely selective. Before leaving the company, he left Iwata with one parting request: that Nintendo should give birth to wholly new ideas and create hardware which reflects that ideal, and make software that adheres to the same standard. Iwata would take this to heart. In 2002, Iwata would become Nintendo's 4th president, and he would completely restructure Nintendo's model from top to bottom, promoting Shigeru Miyamoto, Genyo Takada, Shinji Hatano, and Yoshihiro Mori all as directors, placing them on equal footing with himself to keep him in check and to create better synergy. Iwata would hold one-on-one personal conversations with employees, one of his first actions as president, as he didn't want to be just another executive telling his people what to do, but rather to support their ideas, personally meeting with all 40 department heads and 150 employees. Iwata would later recall sitting down with each person twice a year for a one-on-one chat. I found that everybody touched on different themes. The only constant from one interview to the next was my opening question: are you happy doing what you're doing? When I asked people this question, they had all kinds of answers. As you can imagine, without mutual sympathy and understanding, I see no point in this kind of dialogue, which is why if someone had complaints, I made sure to hear them out. Miyamoto said Iwata helped the flow of employee ideas across the entire company. Iwata was trying to better understand their personal goals and views, encouraging employees to pursue their own ideas even over his, letting everyone know that it was okay to disagree with him. During this time, the GameCube was struggling to keep up in a market dominated by powerful hardware and mature gaming, business models both Sony and Microsoft have adopted. And while Iwata still managed to connect third-party developers with Nintendo like Capcom, Iwata still thought the gaming industry was becoming too exclusive and not very accessible for the less experienced players, and the current focus would ultimately be the decline of the gaming industry. He would recall making Kirby's Dream Land at HAL. The game was easy to pick up, simple and fun for everyone, and he believed that should be the strategy for Nintendo. Rather than compete with Xbox and PlayStation, Nintendo should continue to push for their own new ideas, breaking conventional gaming norms, to avoid direct competition, a blue ocean strategy which offers unique ideas and innovation, accessibility for everyone. Iwata believed that this philosophy defines Nintendo, that changing the way we play games, not powerful hardware, would be the key to revitalizing gaming, that taking risks is the only way to move forward, and Nintendo would run towards risk, not away from it, like finding ways to connect and play with the GameCube through their current handheld, the Game Boy Advance. He wanted to continue in that direction. But Iwata would also need to challenge his Western counterpart overseas. He was introduced to Reggie Fils-Aimé, whose bold Western method to branding contrasted with Nintendo's traditional conservative public image, an image Iwata was wanting to move away from. Their collaboration would lead to a more unified Nintendo, connecting with fans directly all over the world. And the DS would rise during this time, truly marking the beginning of Nintendo's transition into a more innovative culture. He would pioneer the user expansion program. Iwata would invite employees from all departments who were not usually associated with the game design process to submit ideas of their own for new software and features. He believed everyone was worth listening to. With this open collaboration within Nintendo, a wave of new ideas were born. The DS would stand out with unique games, concepts, and designs, again allowing for more ways to play, and Iwata was back there guiding the engineering behind all of these new technologies, some of which were arguably way ahead of its time. Iwata's strategy to set Nintendo apart from all of its competition paid off, as the DS family of systems would go on to sell over 154 million units in its entire lifetime, putting Nintendo's handheld market on top, solidifying Nintendo as its own one-of-a-kind gaming company. Nintendo, preparing to launch its next home console, was building a system for everyone. He challenged his peers to steer off the roadmap, advocating for a revolutionary system that would carry forward Nintendo's legacy of innovation, and tasked Takada with leading the project, urging him to break conventional norms and focus on designing something even a mom would enjoy. There are people who play and people who don't. Will help destroy that wall between them, Iwata said. Iwata would propose ditching the traditional controller in favor of something far more accessible, the ability to use your body as a controller through motion. Iwata emphasized its small size and lightweight design, but nowhere did he talk about specs or its technical power. Iwata highlighted the importance of simplifying game controls, reinforcing its intended accessibility for everyone. Nintendo would focus on creating products that enhance the quality of life. The Wii reshaped the gaming industry, and Iwata empowered developers behind the scenes, challenging them with finding new ways to use the Wii's innovative controls without being too gimmicky. The Wii would go on to surpass the PS3 and Xbox 360 in total unit sales, nearly doubling Nintendo's stock price, leading to record-breaking numbers everywhere, and by the end of 2009, Iwata was recognized as one of the top CEOs worldwide, with the Wii hailed as a defining success under his leadership. The Wii proved that gaming was possible for everyone, in not just homes but also hospitals and even retirement homes. Iwata's ultimate goal has always been to bring joy to everyone no matter your demographic, and he held true to these values even when the market was starting to gravitate away from these ideas in 2011 and 2012. At this point, Nintendo's latest iteration of the DS, the 3DS, with its 3D depth, built-in gyroscope, and augmented reality, all new groundbreaking features, was losing its steam in the market, even with Iwata calling for price cuts. And their newest home console, the Wii U, while incredibly innovative with the introduction of its gamepad, was also becoming Nintendo's slowest-selling console. Iwata would take full responsibility. Of course, being a programmer himself, he would go on to say, "If the system doesn't work, it's definitely your fault." But Iwata refused to punish Nintendo's employees. To avoid layoffs, he would voluntarily take a 50% pay cut to help pay for all their salaries, also convincing all of Nintendo's board members to take pay cuts as well, in order to protect his employees' job security. Iwata would have to make big changes. He would become CEO of Nintendo of America, moving previous CEO Tatsumi Kimishima to managing director of Nintendo, while Reggie would remain as Nintendo of America's president and COO. This new move would allow Reggie and the American teams to have better streamlined communication with Iwata and his teams. With these new changes, Iwata and Reggie would start making even more bold moves. Rather than hosting large-scale press conferences, Nintendo would now hold smaller targeted presentations, in a way that's never been done before. This would be a series of online broadcasts, sharing game news directly with fans, often with quirky tones that reflected Iwata's own personality. And Iwata would become a public image for Nintendo as he grew more comfortable in front of the camera. Fans would see Nintendo's executives not as money-hungry corporate CEOs, but rather warm, friendly, and recognizable faces. Iwata sketched the idea for interactive toys that could connect with Nintendo games, using Nintendo characters to, again, create new experiences. Amiibo was shortly announced and became a huge success with fans, generating strong revenue across all Nintendo platforms, and was once again showing the world just who Nintendo was, and the company would finally return to full profitability shortly after the end of 2015's fiscal year, thanks largely to the success of Pokemon and Super Smash Bros., two familiar franchises that seemed to come through just in time, almost as if repaying a long-standing debt to Iwata for the support they had received from him back in the 90s. Iwata would hold strong on his commitment to the idea that creating new ways to play was key to keeping new players interested. He would oversee the development of the NX, later released as the Nintendo Switch. His focus was on creating a system that was both portable and capable of connecting people through shared experiences. And Iwata's vision for the Switch was centered on communication, again accessibility, and innovation, values that had defined his leadership throughout his entire career. In 2014, Nintendo would make a surprise announcement that Iwata would not be attending E3 that year. Iwata would later reveal that he had undergone surgery to remove a tumor in his bile duct. Viewers noticed that he had appeared pale and had lost a considerable amount of weight, though he seemed to approach his appearance with a sense of humor, even updating his Mii to reflect his now slimmer appearance. But Iwata was also responding to growing pressure regarding the gaming industry prioritizing mobile monetization, warning that these trends would compromise the quality and integrity of games, even going so far as to refer to Apple as a potential enemy of the future. He believed mobile monetization did not align with Nintendo's goal of fostering lasting relationships with its audience. Unfortunately, due to Nintendo's past decline in hardware sales, Iwata would have to make a tough decision, announcing a partnership with DNA. This would mark Nintendo's official entry into the mobile gaming space. However, Iwata still stressed that Nintendo would not sacrifice quality for profit, remaining cautious. And only a few months later, in 2015, Nintendo would make another surprise announcement that Iwata would miss his second consecutive E3 appearance. He became ill again, this time being hospitalized. Despite being confined to a hospital bed, Iwata continued working, reviewing and providing feedback on projects like Pokemon Go, as well as ensuring a smooth transition for their next big release, stressing to his colleagues the importance of the Switch's success. He would continue helping others working on games from his hospital room, making sure Nintendo would be set on the right path for the future, when his cancer had unfortunately returned. Iwata passed away at Kyoto University Hospital. Nintendo announced his death the following day. Iwata's untimely passing left the entire world in shock. Tributes came from all over: fans, peers, collaborators, even competitors. The entire gaming world had been touched in some positive way by Iwata's presence. Miyamoto said Iwata was a friend more than anything, that he never felt like a boss or that he was working under him, saying Iwata never got angry, that they never fought. Itoi mentioned Iwata thoroughly enjoyed seeing people smile, that it was his life's work to foster happiness, that he loved supporting and understanding people. As Reggie once said, Iwata truly was unique, a gentle revolutionary and a revered leader, who was humble and who always put the needs of others before his. He changed the way we play games, and for a lot of us, he's the reason we play games. He dedicated his life to creating joy, leading one of the world's most admirable companies. With his empathy and his eagerness to understand, he was known for his unconventional ideas and challenging the norm. Iwata was the embodiment of Nintendo. Playful, quirky, and fun. Video games are meant to be just one thing: fun. Fun for everyone. Satoru Iwata.
On my business card, I am a corporate president. In my mind, I am a game developer. But in my heart, I am a gamer.
If Satoru Iwata's legacy inspires you, I strongly recommend checking out Ask Iwata, a book dedicated to the Iwata Asks interview series. It's written and edited by Hobonichi, the company founded by Mother creator Shigesato Itoi. It includes comments from himself and colleagues on their relationship with Iwata. And if you're interested in supporting a cause that I think best honors Iwata's legacy, please consider supporting Child's Play, a charity that brings games and fun activities to children struggling in hospitals all across the world. Links are in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time. Bye.